Imagine this. The best pasta sauce you have ever tasted sits abandoned on a plate. Wasted sauce. That is a tragedy. If only you had used Barilla al Bronzo pasta. Its bronze-cut texture holds your sauce and scoops up every last drop. The Italians call that scarpetta. Capture sauce the Italian way. Barilla al Bronzo. Click or tap the banner to find out more.
Now, it's Positively Ernie Extra, New York's TV legend and 77 WABC radio talk host, with positive news and interviews to inform and inspire you. Now, here's Ernie Anastas.
All right. Hi, everybody. And we have another great show for you today. There are so many topics. Many times when I'm thinking about what to talk about, I have such a list. I mean, not only do I have a list, written down from all the stories that I've covered over the years in New York as a main anchor, but I also have, a mental list because I follow things that are happening every day. And today I was saying, you know what? I want to talk about young people. I've always had an interest in youth. I started at 16 years old when I was on radio back in my hometown in New Hampshire. And imagine that. My first job was talking to other young people. And it was a talk show. And I did it on the weekends. And it was so much fun, and it developed into a career. So, when I think about my interest in young people, it brings me all the way into my adult years. And covering news in New York, being an anchorman, I always would do other programs that were related to young people. I did a program called The Next Generation and interviewed a bunch of young people and talked about issues that were important to them. Sort of a throwback to what I started with. Isn't that amazing how sometimes you kind of go back to your roots? Remembering and thinking about what you did and why you enjoyed it so much, and maybe you should continue. So let me give you a quick story because I want to talk to somebody in a minute that's so fascinating. When I would go out to different schools in the New York area, talking to young people in elementary school, I would just be talking about news coverage, and how much fun it was for me to cover the news, even though there were serious topics. And many times I would turn to children and I'd say, okay, so how about if I put you on the news tonight? Do you want to be on the news? And I would look at their faces and they would light up, and then someone would put up their hand and yell, okay, I'm going to have to shoot somebody. And I would hear that, and the kids would laugh. And I said, no, don't laugh. There's nothing funny about that. Because, I think many times we all figure that what's on the news is rewarding bad behavior. Someone does something wrong. Okay, let's face it. That's what the news is about. But it shouldn't be all the time. We should have some balance. And every time I would hear a child talk about doing something wrong to be recognized, that bothered me. And it led to a book, and it was called Ernie and the Big News, The Adventures of a TV Reporter. And I had so much fun with that book. We gave out 20,000 copies in New York, and talk to all of these young people about how there are good stories that we can share on the media and share with one another. And it's the topic today that I really want to talk about, and it's an interesting one. So I've invited someone very special, someone very dear to my heart. She's an amazing human being. Her name is Joan Bauer. She is a New York Times best-selling author, screenwriter, songwriter, speaker who has won numerous awards for her 14 novels and more for young readers. Hi, Joan. How are you?
Oh, Ernie, hi. I'm doing well. It's so good to be with you this morning.
It's a wonderful opportunity for us to talk. And you are doing so much. You've worked with young people. You've written all these books. I want to ask you, you know what we're talking about today, and that's the influence that the media has on young people, particularly when they're watching the news. With your experience, Joan, and your family, what is your feeling about young people watching the news and what we should be looking out for, how to help them?
I want to tell you a story that is Fred Rogers, the great Fred Rogers, told this story. And he said that when he was a boy and something frightening happened in the world, his mother would always say to him, pay attention to the people who are helping. Those are the ones to learn from.
Right.
And I feel that message and that lesson was never more important than today. for us to grab hold to.
Absolutely. And parents have such a tremendous influence. There was a survey out and asked a lot of young people, who are your heroes? And they didn't jump and talk about a celebrity or a sports figure. Almost all of them responded the same way. My parents. The influence that a parent has on a child is just incredible. It's there, and we have to recognize that, and parents have to make sure they pay attention to it, particularly when kids, are watching the news and following the events of what's happening. My concern, Joan, and I know you are concerned the same way, is how the news can influence a young person's mind. And when they see all of these negative stories, what does it do to them? How does it make them react?
Yeah, and it's interesting that often a child will sit down and watch an entire news show, but often they'll just get some of the images, the scary images.
Sure.
They'll just hear something on the radio, so they don't get it in context. And even if they did, they don't necessarily have the skills to process it. I think there are a lot of scary things going on out there, but I think that one of the ways is to sort of pull down the truth, and for an adult to say to a child, to help them gain kind of a sense of personal control.
Yes.
Let's talk about what's going on today.
Yeah.
You can't talk about everything.
No,
right?
but that's the key.
Let's
talking.
Let's talk about a couple of things. What are you seeing? Is there anything that you're kind of concerned about? And when you begin to open up these conversations, it's so powerful. I think sometimes, adults are like ship captains in stormy seas with kids. Yeah. We have to set our compass to true north. And to me, the true north means let's talk about the fear. Let's talk about the kid's strength. Right. I think it's important not to just talk about one thing, but always then say, okay, we are now in a time, where these things are going on and they're scary. But let's talk about how to be people of grit and people of strength in these times.
Joan, that is the key, in my opinion, too. Being able to talk. Many times, we're stuck with technology and people are on their telephones. How many times do you go out and you see families at a table and no one's talking to each other? We're all on that telephone and this is the way they communicate. I get very concerned about that. And, years back, and I've reported the news, as you know, many years in New York, we didn't have some of the stories that we have today. I mean, you talk about children bringing it home. How many shootings? I don't even want to mention them in schools. Right? In places of worship, in malls, on the street, everywhere. And you turn around and you say, hey, these kids, are feeling it. And I talk to a lot of families, and their kids have had nightmares, worried about that. But you have to talk to them. You have to explain to them. You have to give them a place to go. And if you don't, then, they start internalizing a lot of this stuff, and it can lead to some problems.
I agree. And the word that you keep using, Ernie, is to, not at. Not talk at them, talk to them and have the conversation. And I think it's a very powerful thing when a parent says, I'm worried about this too. I really thought about this. These are things that are not, I'm not closing my eyes to. One of the interesting things that can really happen, you mentioned the shooting. Certainly, my goodness, everybody that's everywhere. Yeah. To actually develop, if you can, some type of a safety procedure. Okay, it's scary to think about that and say, they're going to be more nervous. I don't think so. I think if all of a sudden you say, let's put together a plan. What would happen? If something happens and we need to leave the house fast, let's make sure we have a to-go bag. Let's make sure that, and everybody knows where it is. If we're in a situation where there might be a shooting, what are we going to do? Talk about it. There's something that brings it down. It doesn't bring it to size, but it doesn't make you feel like there's nothing that you can do.
Right. It gives them some sense of security.
Kids.
Right.
That's right.
Joan, my concern many times, and I don't mean to put down many of great colleagues and a lot of companies that are trying their best, but, and when you talk about age groups too, there are the young kids, 5, 6, 10, 12, and then you get the teenagers, and, there's this copycat syndrome that, we could get into, and that's a frightening situation. Many times you hear stories, you see stories, real things that happen where these young people are doing many of these terrible things, and you say, they saw that on television. They saw it in a movie. Well, that's hard to control. I know that. But I would like to see, the responsibility with the media companies and a lot of organizations like the National Association of Broadcasters, AFTRA, which is a union for broadcasters, Radio, TV, News Directors Associations. I'd like to see them get involved a little bit more and look for the balance, which is what I try to do. Look for the balance of the news. We're going to report. We're not going to censor. We're going to report the hard stories. But let's get some other stories in there as well. More of that, more positive, uplifting stories, so people know that it's not all bad.
That is outstanding, and I couldn't agree with that more. And it's a powerful reframing of things so that we see, these things are happening, but these good things are happening.
Right.
And we can do that with individual children too, Ernie. We can say, this happens and we're scared, but let me tell you what I see in you. I see a strength in you, and let's begin to find out what some of their passions are and begin to build those things up that have nothing to do with the news, but they're having successes. That kind of stuff, that kind of resilience training just stays with a kid.
It sure
really
does.
Learning through play starts with Lego Duplo. With Lego Duplo, toddlers can develop real-life skills while having fun with colorful bricks made just for them. Large, easy to grip, and safe to explore. When children express themselves with Lego Duplo, they build patience, problem solving, and empathy. See your child learn perseverance and self-expression with everything they imagine and create. Visit lego.com/preschool to learn more.
This episode is brought to you by Nespresso and Samra Origins by the Weekend Coffee Collection.
Introducing Samra Origins. My collaboration with Nespresso is a connection to my roots, to my mother, Samra. Coffee that hits the right notes. It transports you. Crafted with unique notes and bold, soaring flavors. Experience a taste that moves you. Nespresso and Samra Origins.
Discover more at Nespresso.com.
Joan, you're an amazing writer. You've won so many awards. You're doing so many wonderful projects to help kids. Let me ask you about this, because we're still talking about information here. This is what it's all about. And tell me what kids are reading today. What are they looking for? What are the most popular topics for young readers?
Yeah, well, certainly, superheroes are very important to kids.
Yeah.
Sports, and all those things. And I think, but when you think about superheroes, they're really fighting good versus evil. When you think about sports, that is developing skills and being on a team, and all of that. They want, I think, the realistic fiction also about kids finding their voices, kids stepping outside of who they normally are, or maybe their community, and really making a difference. And there's some very, very powerful, ways that stories just come into our lives.
Yeah.
Ernie, you and I have talked about this before, but stories are just, wow, they're like smart bombs,
aren't they?
They can kind of go right down into our hearts, and they can just explode right where they need to be, because they teach us about choices.
Right.
They teach us about overcoming. They teach us about ourselves.
Have you seen a lot of kids that are reading books, or are they going into technology and spending more time there than actually reading a book?
Well, reading scores sadly are just have plummeted. It is very it's really a crisis. So yeah. I think there's a lot of video games. There's a lot of not reading, and when something becomes hard, right? We don't want to kind of run to it. It kind of makes sense. But how do we get them back with stories. And how do we get, we can read together as families. We can, find new ways to bring stories into kids' lives. And we can really, but not just say, here's a book, read it.
Right.
To really get back to the conversation now. What we're try to find out where our kids are at right now.
Yeah.
And start then bring a story into them and into their lives that's talking about that kind of thing. It's very important. I do think, and it's a hard thing to do, I think there have to be turn-off times, unplug times for kids with a computer. I really do.
Sure.
And for families. And for, kids to see their parents have a pile of books by their bedsides. They just begin to see that. And stories haven't gone away.
No,
they really haven't. I mean, video games are stories, and but that kind of thing is we just begin to get it back.
Yes,
just begin to start it. And sometimes there will be resistance, but that doesn't mean that it's wrong. I've been thinking about strength training a lot. I really hate it. I hate lifting those weights. I really do. And my muscles hurt and all of that. But I know that as I'm doing that, I am building something strong. And I think we have to think about this time with our kids. Let's put them into strength training.
That's good stuff, and it does, I think, start at home. That's a real important base. And role models. I'm really into role models and making sure that you do set the example. It sounds like an old expression, but it's true. If you show your child that this is what you're doing and this is how you're sharing it with them, they're going to learn from that. We learn from our parents, and we learn from our teachers as well. I think inspiring young people especially, makes a difference. I started to talk about when I was going out to these schools and talking to these young people and giving them copies of my book, I would share a story with them. I said, when I was a teenager, like 13 years old, we had a career day, and people would come in and talk about different types of work and different jobs and careers. And I remember talking to my homeroom teacher, Miss Evelyn Ryan, and I went over to her and I said, Miss Ryan, how do you know what to do? How do you know how to choose your career? And she looked at me. She used to call me Ernest. Ernest. She said, Ernest. I said, yes. She said, whatever you enjoy doing will be the avenue to your success. Now, I'm 13 years old, and I said, whoa. I said, yeah, what does that mean? She said, well, let me ask you this. What do you like to do in your free time when you're able to do whatever you want? And I said, well, I built a little radio station in my basement, and I play radio. She said, oh, that's it. She said, you have to love something. You have to have passion. And when I would go out to these schools, I would ask these kids the same question. What do you like to do in your free time? Maybe this is a job for you. And they would light up. They'd put up their hands and they would talk about whether it was sports or they were like building things, blocks. Maybe they loved fish and they were interested in oceanography. They would just light up because they were in love with something that came natural to them. Isn't that a wonderful thing?
That is a wonderful thing, and just to know that going back, we human beings have been created with these special loves in our heart, and to find that in kids, I'll get letters from kids, or I'll go to schools too. Yeah. And I remember one girl wrote me, and she said, "Mrs. Bauer, I wish you were my mother." And I went,
how nice is that? What a compliment! Yeah.
But I mean, you don't want to read a book where people aren't passionate about things, and that's the great thing. Sometimes right now, kids aren't kind of surrounded by that. There's a lot of upheaval, and there's a lot of downward emotions right now. But if you read a book where somebody's got a goal, right, and they're going to get through it no matter what, it's just a powerful breaking open, I think. I think of kids' hearts. But the number one example of how you build resilience is to find passion. To find a kid's excitement, and then encourage them. Wow. Okay, what are we going to do? We're going to buy a kit for you to build to build a radio. I love the way some kids. I love the way you were you befriended that boy who didn't have anybody to sit with. That was awesome.
Yeah.
Good for you. You've got great people skills. Whatever it is, really think about it and let kids know that there is something inside of them that the world needs. I call it, if I can do two things for young people through my stories, the first is to help them find the hero they've got inside.
Good.
And the second is to let them know that adversity, if we let it, can make you stronger.
That's a good point. That's because, unfortunately, but it's part of life, kids have to go through these trials. They have to go through these difficult periods where they're having difficult times with relationships, with other kids. Maybe they're struggling in school and other things that are happening in life, but they have to learn that they can overcome that and it can become their strength. I like that, Joan, a lot. That's good. That's great.
That's true.
Yeah.
And, you look to sports and, nobody was sort of born being a brilliant, hitter, right? You got to get out there and people pitch to you and they pitch to you and they pitch to you. And practice really does work, and it works for emotions too. It works with people. It's worth, all of it. So I think if we can get into that kind of mindset a little bit, will help kids just see, hey, failing is part of it. Striking out is okay.
Yes.
And all of these things, it's just part of how you grow.
Right. It's not a failure. It's a learning experience. And that's what we have to drive home. You mentioned the word sports before we go. That's a great area. And a lot of parents, push their kids into getting into sports. And I think that's wonderful because there's so much to learn from that. I mean, they learn about responsibility and teamwork. And being gracious, on the field. And I think that it's a good thing to have our young people involved in sports. Just to close here, with social media and with technology, there's a lot of good, that we can talk about. And I use it so much in my field, able to just have access to so much information instantly, and good information too. But at the same time, we have to be careful because there are a lot of pitfalls. And use it properly, but let's go back to the basics, Joan. Let's read to our kids. Before we go, tell me what you're working on right now. I know you have a lot of projects.
I do. Right now I'm working on an adult novel about a singer who loses her voice and she can't give up. She has to keep going to see if she can find it.
Wow.
I've written a screenplay for my novel Hope Was Here that is going to be, when the writer's strike is over.
Oh yeah.
It's going to be it is destined to become a movie, and I also have a middle grade book that I'm working on. So I liked having different kinds of projects, but it's funny, Ernie. They all come down to this: finding your voice. Yep. Just not giving up. What's the next step that I got to take to get what my characters want?
That's terrific.
That's kind of my thing.
Oh,
so
man.
I love it. I love writing, and I love writing for different ages.
It's clearly worked for you in so many ways, and you continue to do it. I love it. Joan Bauer, what a wonderful guest. What a terrific topic. And I hope that, together we've helped people who are listening to us to learn something and to apply it to their life. That's what this is all about. Joan, thank you so much. Please come back again, all right?
Ernie, I will. Thank you.
Love it. Thank you, everybody, for watching and listening. I'm Ernie Anastas. I'll catch you next time. All right, have a great day. And remember, you were born to be alive.